The moment her voice cracked, something invisible shifted inside the diner. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. Enough to make a fork stop halfway to someone's mouth. Enough to make a man at the counter glance over his shoulder. Enough to make the hum of conversation fade into an uneasy quiet. She stood there behind the counter, gripping a metal tray with both hands, trying desperately to steady herself. Her name tag read Emily, but no one had used her name all night. To the people laughing behind her, she wasn't a person. She was just part of the place. Another server, another face they believed didn't matter. The tray tilted just slightly. Coffee spilled across the counter, dark liquid spreading like a stain. Emily whispered an apology out of habit, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. 3 men sat on the stools beside her. Leather jackets, heavy boots, loud voices, the kind of men who took up space and enjoyed doing it. They had been there for nearly an hour, ordering slowly, laughing loudly, making sure everyone knew they owned the room. Or at least they thought they did. One of them leaned in close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. His words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The smile on his face made it worse, like it was all a joke, like she was supposed to laugh along. Emily didn't laugh. Her fingers trembled harder. She tried to step away, but the narrow space between the counter and the stools boxed her in. Another man casually shifted, blocking her path. A third rested his arm along the counter, just close enough to make her heart race. They weren't yelling. They weren't causing a scene. And that was the problem. People nearby could sense something was wrong, but nothing obvious enough to interrupt. That's how it always worked. Quiet pressure, quiet fear, quiet control. Emily swallowed and whispered again, "Please, I need to get back to work." That was when one of them grabbed her wrist. Not violently, not aggressively enough to draw attention, just enough to make a point. She froze. Her eyes filled, and this time she couldn't stop it. A soft sound escaped her throat, half breath, half plea. It wasn't a scream, it was worse than that. It was a breaking sound. That was the moment the diner truly went silent. The men didn't notice. They were too busy enjoying the power, too busy believing this place was forgettable, too busy thinking no one here would matter tomorrow. They didn't see the man sitting alone in the booth by the window. He wore plain clothes, nothing expensive, nothing tactical, the kind of outfit that blended into a crowd without effort, a jacket folded neatly beside him, a half-finished cup of coffee in front of him. He had been watching the entire time. Not staring, observing. Beside him lay a German shepherd. The dog hadn't moved since they walked in. No barking, no growling, just stillness. The kind of stillness that made something deep in your chest feel uneasy without knowing why. The man slowly placed his coffee cup down, carefully, quietly. Emily's voice cracked again. "Please stop." One of the men laughed louder this time. Another leaned closer, saying something meant only for her. The third looked around the diner, daring anyone to interfere. No one did. Except the man by the window. He stood up. Not fast. Not angry. Deliberately. The sound of the booth seat sliding back was soft, but in the silence it echoed. Every head turned. The man walked forward, his steps unhurried, his posture relaxed but alert. The German shepherd rose beside him, moving as one, calm and focused, eyes locked on the men at the counter. The man's voice was steady when he spoke. "Let her go." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Something about the way he said it made the room feel smaller. The men turned, surprised at first, then amused. They looked him over. Average build, calm expression, a dog. One of them smirked. "Mind your business." The man didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply repeated himself. Let her go now. The German Shepherd stepped forward half a pace, muscles tense, ears forward. Still no sound, just presence. Emily felt the grip on her wrist loosen slightly. The man holding her arm hesitated. And for the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across his face. That was when the second man laughed, trying to break the tension. You think you scare us? The man's eyes never left them. You're done here, he said calmly. The diner felt like it was holding its breath. One of the men pushed back from the counter, standing now, trying to regain control of the situation. He took a step forward, invading the man's space, reaching inside his jacket in a way that made several people gasp. What happened next was so fast that later, witnesses would struggle to describe it. There was no chaos, no wild movement, just precision. In a single controlled motion, the man redirected the attacker's arm, stepping inside his reach, removing the threat without excess force. Cups fell. A chair scraped loudly across the floor. The German Shepherd moved instantly, positioning itself between Emily and the others, body low, eyes locked, commanding space without touching anyone. The second man stumbled backward, shocked more than hurt. The third froze, suddenly realizing this wasn't what they expected. The diner erupted into stunned silence. The man restrained the first attacker with calm efficiency, getting him down onto the floor, controlling the situation without panic, without anger. Stay down, he said quietly. They listened. The German Shepherd stood firm, unmoving, a silent barrier no one dared cross. Emily backed away, shaking, her heart pounding as reality caught up to her. Someone gently guided her toward the kitchen. Another customer whispered that help was already on the way. The man released his hold only when the danger was gone, stepping back, keeping his eyes on all three men until they were seated on the floor, defeated not by violence, but by certainty. He reached into his jacket briefly, showing identification only to the manager who stood nearby in disbelief. A former member of the United States Navy SEALs. No announcement. No explanation. Just enough. Police sirens grew louder in the distance. The man turned to Emily, draping his jacket over her shoulders. It's over, he said gently. You're safe. Her knees nearly gave out. As officers arrived and the men were taken away, the diner slowly returned to motion. People whispered, some wiped their eyes, others stared at the booth by the window. The man and his German Shepherd returned there quietly, sitting down as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone in that diner knew better. And as Emily watched him from the kitchen doorway, still shaking, one thought echoed in her mind. If he hadn't been there, if he hadn't been watching. She never finished the thought. Because she didn't have to. The diner didn't feel the same after that. Even after the flashing lights faded outside. Even after the police cars pulled away. Even after the door swung shut behind the last officer. Something had changed. Emily sat on a crate in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of water she hadn't taken a single sip from. Her body was safe now, but her nerves hadn't caught up yet. Her manager stood nearby, speaking quietly, checking on her again and again, but Emily could barely hear the words. All she could think about was how close it had been. How small the space had felt. How powerless she had felt. And how suddenly that had changed. Through the small service window, she could see the booth by the window. The man sat there exactly where he had before, his posture relaxed, his attention focused on his dog. He gently adjusted the German Shepherd's leash, offering a quiet word only the dog could hear. There was no victory pose. No attention-seeking. Just calm. The German Shepherd lay at his feet again, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Customers whispered in low voices, Some stared openly, others avoided looking, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. A few people quietly paid their checks and left, shaking their heads in disbelief. One older man at the counter finally broke the silence. "I've been coming here 20 years, he said softly to no one in particular. Never seen anything like that." No one disagreed. The manager took a deep breath and walked toward the booth. His steps were hesitant, respectful. "Sir," he said, keeping his voice low, I just wanted to thank you." The man looked up, meeting his eyes with a calm nod. "She's okay now," the manager continued, "thanks to you." The man nodded again. "That's what matters." The manager hesitated, then asked the question everyone else was thinking. "Are you law enforcement?" The man shook his head. "Not anymore." That was all he offered. The manager smiled, a little overwhelmed. "Your meal on the house, anytime for life." The man almost smiled back. Emily watched from the kitchen, her chest tightening. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief, but also curiosity, and gratitude so strong it scared her. After a few minutes, she stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself forward. The manager noticed and moved to stop her, but she shook her head. "I just want to say thank you," she whispered. She walked slowly toward the booth. The man noticed her immediately and stood before she could speak, creating space instead of closing it. The German Shepherd looked up at her, calm and steady, tail resting still on the floor. Emily swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "You don't have to," the man interrupted gently. "You're safe, that's enough." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they weren't from fear. She glanced down at the dog. "He's incredible." "He is," the man said, a note of pride in his voice, "and he knows when to listen." The dog's ears flicked, as if he understood every word. Emily hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask your name?" The man paused, then smiled faintly. "Just call me Jack." She nodded, "Thank you, Jack." As she walked back toward the kitchen, something inside her settled. For the first time that night, her breathing slowed. Jack sat back down, finishing his coffee in silence. The world outside the diner had already moved on. Cars passed, the road hummed, somewhere someone laughed. But inside those walls, people would remember this night for a long time. Later, as the diner emptied, a state trooper returned briefly to collect a final statement. He approached Jack with a respectful nod. "We've got them," the trooper said quietly. "Turns out they've been causing trouble up and down the highway. You likely saved more than one person tonight." Jack shrugged slightly. "They made their choices." The trooper glanced at the German Shepherd. "Dog's impressive." Jack allowed a small smile. "He's family." The trooper hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Your record says former Navy." Jack nodded. "A former member of the United States Navy SEALs, to be precise," the trooper said. "Figures." Jack didn't respond. Some things didn't need to be explained. When the trooper left, Jack paid what remained of the bill despite the manager's protest. He stood, clipped the leash securely, and headed for the door. Emily watched him go, a strange mix of emotions pulling at her chest. She wanted to ask more, to know more. But she didn't. Some people come into your life for a moment, not to stay, but to change something. Jack pushed the door open, the bell ringing softly. Then he was gone. Weeks passed. Life returned to routine, but Emily wasn't the same. She noticed things she hadn't before, how people treated service workers, how silence could be just as loud as shouting, how strength didn't always announce itself. She also noticed how many people came in asking about that night. About the man. About the dog. Some customers left bigger tips, others left notes of encouragement. A few even apologized, not for anything they'd done, but for times they hadn't spoken up. One afternoon, a family stopped Emily as she refilled their drinks. "Our daughter wants to know," the mother said gently, "if heroes are real." Emily smiled. "Yes," she said, "they are." Meanwhile, miles away, Jack drove down a quiet stretch of highway, the German Shepherd resting comfortably in the back seat. The road ahead was long but familiar. Jack wasn't running from anything. He was simply moving forward. After years of service, years of structure and noise and danger, he had learned to value stillness, places where no one knew his past, where he could sit quietly and watch the world pass by. He didn't look for trouble, but he never ignored it either. The dog stirred as they slowed near a rest stop. Jack pulled over, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sky stretched wide above them, stars just beginning to appear. He knelt beside the German Shepherd, scratching behind his ears. "You did good," Jack murmured. The dog wagged his tail once, satisfied. They had trained together for years, not just commands, trust, awareness, control, knowing when to act and when to wait. That night at the diner hadn't been about strength. It had been about timing, about choosing to stand when standing mattered. Jack looked back toward the road, thinking of the waitress's face when she realized she was safe, thinking of the silence that had fallen before everything changed. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had done what needed to be done. And that was enough. Back at the diner, months later, Emily trained a new hire, a nervous teenager on her first shift. "People can be kind," Emily said softly, "but sometimes they forget. If something feels wrong, you speak up, and if you see something wrong, you don't look away." The girl nodded. Emily glanced toward the booth by the window. It was empty, but she smiled anyway, because she knew something now. Evil doesn't always announce itself, but neither does courage. Sometimes it sits quietly nearby, watching, waiting for the moment it's needed.